When I first came up with 9 lessons, the general feeling was that's a stupid idea and it's not going to work.
People genuinely presenting things that they care about.
And there's big ideas and there's interesting things and there's satisfying curiosity.
Science meets comedy, meets music.
It was a great big variety cavalcade.
I think it's quite good if there can be something vaguely structured with a bit of song and dance.
Everything in this one big melting pot of a show.
Anything could happen.
Because you never know what's going to be next.
So it's just a statement for people to just turn and look at us and go, eh? What is that?
It's a secular celebration of Christmas.
In which, as well as the jugglers and the comedians and the musicians,
you know, it's like a festive thing, but about science and maths and stuff.
there were also particle physicists and entomologists.
It's a very wonderful thing because it shows you the power of science.
I'd say it's kind of a snapshot of human creativity because that's what our new marketing person told me to say.
You come out of one of these shows with a little bit more wonder in the universe.
This is a way to be playful. It's a way to think differently about how we communicate.
I asked him today, Robin Ince, I said, remind me how I know you, because he seems to have always been there, like one of those sort of Easter Island statues.
I think Robin has genuinely changed the conversation internationally, actually, not just nationally, but internationally, about science.
Hello! Hello, and welcome to my folly.
Yeah, let's do that. That's better, isn't it?
Any particle physicists in? Excellent, here's one for you.
I used to do a show called The Book Club, which was predominantly reading out from books that I found in charity shops that had a certain level of absurdity, ridiculousness, or whatever it might be.
We did book club for a long time before 9 Lessons, so that was Robin's kind of crazed monthly thing in which some people did their regular set.
So, hello, welcome to my bit.
Or, you know, sketches or songs, and other people used to read from not necessarily great books. Robin has such a tremendous supply of books that obviously it was always something different.
The Fear of the Lord colouring book. You can't get better than that, can you?
I quite often read from the Murder, She Wrote tie-in novels, which were jointly written by Donald Bain and Jessica Fletcher of Murder, She Wrote, who's technically fictional.
I mean, I'm always meeting people who are eager to share their mystery ideas with me.
It revealed a whole different side to her character in which she still couldn't drive, but she could pilot a plane and so on.
Makes perfect sense to me.
What I loved about it was the wide array of acts that he had on and how we felt like we could take risks. There weren't really any other gigs like that.
But don't stop and tiddle that boy, it is my. Baby, I'll be fed and chase you down and tiddle you, la la, me, pa.
And so the template had been set, I think, by Book Club for something that wasn't going to be necessarily just a lot of comedians doing a short bit of their set. It was always going to be something a bit different, and that there was going to be a kind of cabaret kind of or musical sort of subtext behind it, because Robin's a huge student of the history of comedy as well as a great practitioner of it, obviously.
Then I decided at some point, I was like, oh, well, we're doing lots of stuff that's kind of taking the mickey a bit. And then I decided that it might be more fun to, or not more fun, but an additional thing. I think I called it, the first version of it was Children, what was it called?
And it wasn't book club, it would have been some variation on the 9 Lessons universe.
It was something like Children of Extraordinary Talents, or it was some name which wasn't far from what the X-Men used to get called.
I want to be called Mystique.
I like being part of bills that are more interesting and that are cross-generic. I don't like things that are just, who's your first act, who's your second act, who's your third act, get out. And I like things that play with the form. I like the fact that stand-up itself as a medium is so fluid that, you know, it almost can incorporate a scientist giving a lecture and someone falling over.
9 Lessons just felt like a natural extension of that, I suppose, and that it carried the same ethos. But then the sciencey bit began to be involved, which it wasn't so much in the book club.
And that mashing up of science and music and art was where Cosmic Shambles came in. So that was the idea of Cosmic Shambles, was we were doing these live shows where there was art and there was science and they were all so happily working together, and we wanted to make something which could be bigger and have documentaries and long interviews on. And so that's how it started as a live show, and then it was a realisation that that was very much just the seed.
9 Lessons has been part of the Cosmic Shambles universe since 2017, kind of officially branded in that way. But I first met Robin in 2006. I'd already been to book club and those shows beforehand, and we just got on straight away. I hired him to narrate a documentary series that I was directing about mathematicians who'd become poker players, and we started loosely working together a lot around then.
And late 2006, early 2007, I'd started to put on shows where I think one of the first ones, Ben Goldacre, I'd met him doing something at the BBC.
The gravity of this tale is denoted by my serious tact.
And I got him to come along, and so we had comedians, we had epidemiologists, and I started to get, you know, also the odd physicist coming down. So that was about 2006.
You know, people were always writing new things, getting to try out things they couldn't otherwise do.
You're laughing already, that's so weird.
He was always making sure that the bill was stacked with surprises.
You must never open the box.
I had worked for him at the book club because he was the head honcho, and I was a very junior honcho, that senior in age, junior in honcho-ness. And I've remained it. I am very low down on the ladder of honcho. Anyway, good idea, I said.
Oh, they tickle the truth. I like them.
The thing that happened next was going on a local ITV show, and I got asked on to talk about whether the country was becoming more secular. And then when I got there, it turned out they went, oh, we've slightly changed the title. It's now called Who's Taking the Christ Out of Christmas? And I just immediately knew that it would be a dreadful waste of everyone's time. It would be a kind of slanging match filled with misinformation and disinformation. And it was like Nick Ferrari and Vanessa Feltz, and also in the audience was Stephen Green from Christian Voice.
Stephen Green, for those who don't know, is from Christian Voice, a tremendously un-Christian organisation.
I remember being very riled by the whole experience in terms of just the rubbish that was spoken about Winterval, which is the famous thing that was often used. Oh, they've banned Christmas, they call it Winterval now in Birmingham.
Basically, they kept going on about something that wasn't true and all picking on him, and he became furious. And then he got home, as one often does after these sort of incidents, and realised what he should have said, but it was about 5 hours too late by then. And instead of just letting it go, what he's decided to do, which is a clear indication that the man's having a midlife crisis, he decided to go to the trouble of setting up these enormous shows to kind of prove that he didn't have some kind of grudge against happiness.
And so that, as I was sat in the cab afterwards, seething.
I am untethered and my rage knows no bounds!
And so I thought, well, what about for all those people who love Christmas but don't have religion and don't really know where to celebrate as a group? And so that's where 9 Lessons and Carols for, at that point, Godless People came from.
It is Christmas, and therefore we celebrate the birth of little baby Niels Bohr, who was born in a slightly smaller bed than average, but not a manger.
At the time, there was a big cultural sort of shift in which we were trying to kind of say, well, we might not be religious, but that doesn't mean we don't enjoy cultural milestones. It doesn't mean we don't want to celebrate holidays. It just maybe means we don't believe exactly the same things as you, but we're all going to sit down and watch the Muppets Christmas Carol.
Of course. Christmas is thought to be a time when atheists turn into Scrooges and Grinches and things, and we don't at all. I mean, at least some of us may do, but we're probably Scrooges and Grinches anyway.
Humbug.
So there's nothing wrong with an atheist celebrating Christmas or something like Christmas.
And I just remember thinking that it was so lovely to have something Christmassy and non-religious.
God is irrelevant to Christmas, but it doesn't destroy my enjoyment of it, knowing that it comes from Christian stuff.
And it was so nice to have something that's sort of seasonal, you know, it's like a festive thing, but about science and maths and stuff. So, I mean, it's exciting, you know.
I've kind of been lucky enough to do them kind of year on year on year, and just very quickly became one of my favourite parts of Christmas. It's a very specific sort of 9 lessons thing. You know, I remember Sarah Pascoe once borrowing my guitar to do a version of the 12 Days of Christmas that went, I realised on the first day of Christmas that I don't like my family. It was like very, very funny.
I just remember sort of sitting in that room and thinking, I think I found my people.
So, if you're not into Niels Bohr, frankly, it's going to be a fucking dull evening.
I think I first heard of 9 lessons when they were originally called 9 Lessons and Carols for Godless People. There was a lack of the sort of community event that one might have from going to church. I think we have a human need to gather as communities and to celebrate ideas and music and things that we love.
You know, atheism had always been defined as an absence, you know, right down to the very word, atheist, without God.
I am God!
Science hasn't replaced religion for me. Science was just a huge passion, and religion just, I don't get. So I don't care for it. I'm not arsed with it. So it's not like that I've needed to go to in any way prove to them or me why, you know, there is more to life than religion. I think the comfort lies on this plane, either there nor down there, but just among those around. I think the comfort lies at a human level. I think there's still something mystical to be drawn from that, what comfort we draw from the love of those around us.
But Christmas, no, it's grim and depressing outside. We need a Christmas, and I think we just invent one.
I think that this drive to get people at this season when people are being bombarded with lots of nonsense, you know, don't get me wrong, I do love this time of year, but to actually have a intelligence fest, I think that's really important.
There are some Quality Street in the room. You know, I'm seeing familiar Christmassy things here.
And so it was an attempt to spin a negative thing into a positive thing.
But how do you get a Brazil like that? You know, they do one like that size.
Basically, it was meant to be like a fractured version of the Royal Institute Christmas lectures, but it's a little bit now really like the Royal Variety. At any moment, you just expect to go, and now the cast of Hollyoaks doing a dance about wave-particle duality. I'm a wave, I am particle, I am both.
I think that probably one of the first names that I rang would have been Stuart Lee, because Stuart Lee had just had an enormous problem with Jerry Springer the Opera. And I'd wondered about maybe putting on an excerpt of Jerry Springer the Opera, which we never actually did at the 9 Lessons show. I'd already started working with Peter, who was in charge. He was the manager of the Bloomsbury Theatre. We'd already done things like book club shows there. So I got in contact with Peter. I said, look, this idea, what do you think? And he said, well, actually, that really fits in well with UCL as well, because it's University College London venue. And so I think Stuart would have been one of the first.
Well, Robin asked me to be involved in the project, and I thought it sounded really good. And then, to be fair, I did get cold feet a bit, because I was slightly worried about it coming across aggressively. And he was very keen that it wouldn't be a hostile event, and that it would be like inclusive, and that it would be about science and all sorts of woolly thinking, and there'd be all kinds of different people on, not just a sort of night of endless jokes about the same things, and I think he's pulled it off. It is reasonable to assume tonight that there may be a number of jokes about religion over the course of the evening. If you are religious, don't worry. There probably won't be jokes about your religion. There'll be jokes about one of the other religions, you know, the ones that are wrong.
I think what's really important about this show is that it isn't about the denigration of religion, and that's what critics of it have come to convince themselves of, naturally enough, because they haven't taken the time to see it.
We're here to celebrate reason, we're here to celebrate the thought that is given to scientific progress. We're here to celebrate ideas and how they can improve us and the world around us. That's what we're here to celebrate.
This mixture of people was an enormous amount of fun, and that's what I took away with me, is that this is fun. It was fun to be in the green room talking to all these people. It was fun to sneak around the back of the theatre and to watch what they all had to say. And it was such a friendly environment, and it was such a respectful environment in the nicest possible way. It wasn't preachy, but it was just, we're here to listen to everyone, let's listen. And so I remember that impression at the start of this being, this was a nice community of people who were interested in the world, and that was brilliant.
Oddly, it was kind of like a religious experience. It was so exciting that there were that many people that were into this.
It does seem to have worked, and I hope that I hope we've all put a lot of effort into them coming along and 3 nights in a row, and obviously there's been a huge amount of support behind the scenes, and I just hope that Robin can move on now, because that's really what these evenings are about.
And then I was working on the Richard and Judy show at that point, and Richard Dawkins was a guest, and I mentioned to Richard Dawkins would he like to come and do this show, and it kind of built from there.
I made the mistake of wearing a suit, and I felt completely the odd man out, and so I've changed that.
I actually took over from Richard Dawkins as the professor for the public understanding of science, and I did wonder whether actually this gig was part of the brief of being professor for the public understanding of science, because I know Richard had done the show, and sure enough, my first year as this new professor, I got my invite to come and do my first show on 9 Lessons.
I already knew I wanted Martin White to do the music because he'd already been doing the music for the book club, and I thought that would be fun.
Every violinist has played in some orchestra, has got friends who also play the violin, because there's always loads of violins. So you say, oh, you've got a mate, wants to come along and do a silly gig, I'll buy them a beer afterwards and we'll have a laugh and we do these sort of stupid songs, and it snowballs from there. And before you know it, you've got 24 people on stage. You've got 2 timpani and a harp and tubular bells and a 10-piece string section and brass and woodwind.
The first thing I heard of it was a phone call when I just got a new teaching job, teaching drums. And then all of a sudden my phone rang with a random number, which luckily I picked up. And it was Martin White. He had this mystery fax machine orchestra that was the house band. And he said, I've got these shows, it's this many nights at the Bloomsbury, and then we're going to Hammersmith Apollo. And I was like, yeah, I think I can do that. Yeah, that sounds fine.
I think I've been doing it right from the very first one, I think. And that's a lot. That's a lot of collective hours. So they kind of, in the best possible way, merge into this mad kind of blend of experiences.
It's really cold. What's going on?
Just don't breathe in.
It sort of sounded a bit crazy, but I was aware of Robin. I'd seen Robin's stand-up shows, and it felt like something that I was immediately drawn to. So when I got asked to do it initially, I jumped at the chance. I thought, this is going to be great. And so it has proven. It's been quite a big part of my life over many years now.
But it was, 2007 or 2008. Might be 2008, I think, actually, that first year.
I remember Robin texting me, and he said, oh, I'm doing this this new kind of science variety night. And he said, oh, come along, tell me what you think. You know, I have a science background before I did media stuff, so obviously I was interested. And went along to the first one just as an audience member. And I remember thinking, I can't believe this exists.
This is like a thing now.
And I can't believe that this theatre is full, and then it's full the next night and the next night.
Obviously tonight as well is a celebration of geeks and nerds. And hey, do we have any in? There's nothing wrong with it. It's great. I am, by dint of, well, I have no choice. Look at me.
I texted Robin 2 things after. One going, this is going to work. This is brilliant. You're a genius. And also, I can't believe the first song on the playlist after the end of this fantastic joyous night was No Pussy Blues by Grinder Man. Fantastic work. And I said, you know, if you need any help, if you're going to do it again, let me know. I'll happily help out. And then I helped out with a lot of backstage filming and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, he was backstage faffing about stealing crisps and all manner of things. Yeah, that's why we started putting tomatoes on everything.
I'm going to go into anaphylactic shock.
I mean, that's the thing that's important, I think I should add, is yes, I produce them, but I'm just a fan of the shows anyway. Like from that first one I went and saw, I just wanted to be a part of them because I thought they were so brilliant.
It was originally, it was just going to be one night, but that sold out almost immediately, so we made it into 2 nights.
Now, this was the first and initially the only one of these secular Christmas events that Robin booked. He booked it for tonight and it sold out. So an extra date was added. That was last night. And then due to even more demand, the same sort of shows on again on Sunday in a massive capacity at Hammersmith Apollo. And if there's one thing I can't stand, it's the creeping commercialisation of the secular Christmas event.
What was interesting, the first night, Peter from the Bloomsbury said, I've never had so many professors picking up tickets for a show here.
So many doctors.
So night number 1 was a lot of people who would have been like, well, of course, I remember the first time I met Bertrand Russell, of course, at Conway Hall.
A lot of the gigs that I play, if I start talking about science, you can see people going, what's he talking about? Whereas tonight, because many of you are scientists, you'll be going, what's he talking about?
And, you know, there was and then the second night was a lot younger, a lot more kind of, you know, there were a lot more goths there were a lot more people who were into music and science.
Goth, punk, hippie.
I think the mix of the audience is really interesting as well because you have a lot of professional scientists or professional people who work in that area, but a lot of people like myself who are just interested in it and the kind of science curious people.
I'll be honest, I was a little bit worried because I hadn't seen a 9 Lessons before, because I was intimidated by it, because I was like, this is for smart people and I'm not a smart person. I never went to uni, I never did anything like that. And so I was even more terrified at the idea of doing it. And then I very quickly realized that the audience are lovely and people come not because they're smart, but because they would like to learn. And I could relate to that.
It's also really nice to see the audiences who come to these, how they've evolved and changed. It feels like a very young audience here. I was really surprised. But actually, curious people are all people, and that's really quite exciting and quite lovely. There's some very young people, like as in 20s, who are just sort of quite bowled over by the fact that this exists. So it was their first time ever. And I thought that's really lovely to be a very tiny part of.
I get knocked down, and that's enough for me. And
yeah, Robin's book was the importance of being interested, and I think 9 Lessons is the joy of being interested.
I come from the comedians, stay for the science.
We just find that it's something that's become part of a Christmas tradition for us, actually, that we come and get our diet of scientific engagement for the year.
The first ever show I came to, I remember Richard Herringby on telling the rudest, most disgusting jokes. And everyone absolutely adoring it. And then Grace, who we've just seen, came on and did the most heartbreakingly beautiful song I've ever heard.
There's a Yargo sitting on my shoulder every time I hold her, telling me I'm never gonna make the grade.
And the fact that 2 things could coexist on the same bill and everyone just loved it equally, I thought, oh my God, I found my people, and it was just the most magical thing, and I've come ever since.
So you go home feeling full of wonder and enjoyment, really.
I remember the New Scientist wrote an article once, I think probably 2 or 3 years in, and they said that the problem was that it was all filled with people who were already scientists or into science. And I remember writing them saying, no, you've got that wrong.
Wrong, 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 wrong.
That it's filled with people who are curious, and actually we weren't playing to an audience that were like, well, we know this all already. Robin Ince could be the mad scientist of the comedy circuit.
How many scientists do we have in, by the way? Good! We've had very low number of scientists. It's good. We're always happy when there's a low number of scientists because it allows us to be wrong without being picked up on issues.
It was filled with lots of people who were exactly the same as me. They were fascinated by ideas, but they thought those ideas were kind of off limits to them.
The world is full of people trying to divide and conquer, and it's full of algorithms and people who are trying to put things in boxes. Are you this kind of thing or that kind of thing? Do you like this or do you like that? Like, where are your categories? And Shambles basically waves two fingers at all of that. It says that we're human. All of this is part of our world and we're interested in all of it. So there.
Some people, again, I mentioned briefly some of the news media before, there is this idea that, as I'm sure as you know from this evening, science makes things dull, that scientists are these cold people who just look at the facts, and they miss out the fact that science is about imagination. It is about wonder and excitement and questioning this enormous universe we're in.
You come out of one of these shows with a little bit more wonder in the universe. And I guess you get that with Panto, but you don't really have so much there behind you in one of these shows.
I never wanted to make it an entirely capitalist thing. I liked that idea that I would work in tandem with someone else and it would fund them.
So at the Bloomsbury, it was always a benefit for the humanist society. I think that's what it's called. I'll fix that in a caption if it's not called that.
And I can't remember whether the Rationalist Association was going through a tough time then or whatever, but I thought, well, they're really useful. New Humanists is great.
But now each year we rotate who the charities we support are. Two Wheels for Life is a charity very close to me that we support a lot. Mind, mental health, Book Trust, some hospices. We've done a food bank collection for different food banks around London and Manchester. It's genuinely heartwarming every year. You see how much stuff our audience bring to the shows.
Thank you.
So the first year, I think we probably did 2 nights at the Bloomsbury and 1 night at Hammersmith. And so that basically was, Hammersmith sold out. I think in that first bill we had, Jarvis Cocker, Richard Dawkins, Joanna doing her incredible Pan's Person routine.
So I first heard about 9 Lessons when Rob invited me to do the very first one, I expect. The first thing I performed was my Pan's People dance, which is a interpretive dance in the style of Hot Gossip, or not Hot Gossip, they're the sexy ones. Pan's People or Legs & Co. on Top of the Pops in the days before videos and music videos. I think it's a 3,000 capacity, is it? I was very nervous and I said to Stuart Lee, I'm really scared, and he said, don't worry, because if 10% of the audience like you, that's 300 people. If you're in a room above a pub and 10% of 30 people like you, that's 3. So he said it's actually easier to be in front of more people. Isn't that great advice?
It's interesting when, after a while, the smaller ones, you're like, oh, I can be a bit more chatty with the audience, a bit less planned.
If you're laughing at that, you're in for a treat in a moment.
And the big shows, just in a big space, you can't make things complicated. So you've got to hit big ideas quite quickly. So there's a tiny bit of difference in how it's presented, but fundamentally they're just people who are there to hear ideas. It's the same game. It's just slightly more showbiz in the big venues.
I love show business.
The whole idea of it was to have people coming out reeling, going, oh God, I don't know what I want to find out more about now. If only there was a bookshop open at 1 a.m.
And one thing that particularly struck me was going out there and interacting with the audience near the bookstall, and you can see such curiosity among the people. And these are, I think, this is my tribe.
The feeling front of house after a 9 Lessons show is usually a mix of the delight of the audience and then being full of curiosity and questions and sharing the things that they've seen with each other, and exhaustion and worries about getting their trains, because as we know, this show tends to run quite long.
We were allowed to end late.
Well, the first time I came to 9 Lessons was as an audience member, and it was a really cool collection of acts, but it just went on and on and on and on. And I realised that's very much become the theme of the show, that it's just quite a lot of things happening in one night, but it was such a wonderful thing to see.
The one thing you should be in bed, the one thing that
And I think sometimes we ended very late.
We should all fucking be in bed, truth be told, but...
You know, it was meant to finish at 10:30 and sometimes we'd be a lot closer to midnight.
Starting on the front, which I never heard what to do, right? Mainly because I've forgotten most of my material in the 9 hours that I'm waiting to go on stage.
The bills are, as they always were with book club, there's always like 900 people on there. You know, if Robin were left to his own devices, the show would go on for about 4.5 weeks. It's only the fact that Trent keeps him on the straight and narrow and reminds him that we'll get fined if we carry on, that everybody sticks to time.
So there's kind of an art and a science to building a 9 lessons lineup.
It's not logical, it is a gut feeling.
There's so many things that you have to balance with it. And also when you contact everyone, some people will say yes, and then you might get some years where everyone says yes and you realise you've overbooked and you're secretly hoping someone drops out in the day because you know you're going to run over if everyone turns up. But invariably, it's Britain. The trains break and someone can't make it, so it's fine.
But it's part of the joy. There's something sort of chaotic and something joyous in that chaos. It's a really important part of it.
Every year on the run orders that we post around the backstage area, there's something that reminds people to stick to time.
You're going to stick to time, which is very important.
This year, or last year rather, there was a picture of Poppy from the Trolls movie being very sad to tell people that's how running over made me feel.
Sean Penn called. He says to dial it back.
When Robin first built the show, it was everyone doing bite-sized chunks of kind of an unspecified length. And that's kind of why it ran over, because everyone went, oh, I'll do 10 minutes. And 10 minutes turns into 20, because it's difficult to have a concept of time when you're on stage and people are laughing at jokes or you're nervous or whatever.
On the first few times we did it, everyone was so excited to be doing it that everyone overran.
I was born out of time.
Yes, so when I took over producing the show in 2017,
Got a clock to time myself here.
I instigated what everyone now calls the 7-minute rule.
I thought, oh my goodness, 7 minutes. What can I say in 7 minutes?
It's quite hard to keep it down to 7 minutes, but I think I did it.
Yeah, you don't have much time, you have your 7 minutes, but I'm only going to talk about one subject today, so I hope I'll get it in.
I don't think I had actually known about how time works in the 9 Lessons universe. So it was actually a very interesting kind of scientific experiment in terms of observation of time, which stops when Robin Ince talks. But, however, moves very swiftly when the performers are on. And one cannot go over 7 minutes. But it was fantastic. I mean, I got up in front of a live audience and had a tight 7 about syphilis, which is all I think I've ever wanted in life.
You're supposed to be attracted to this idea that there's this kind of unstructured, do-as-you-will sort of prompt for us contributors to the show. And I think that's inspiring. It's kind of daunting as well, but I think for the audience that's an important sort of lure for them. They don't really know what they're going to get.
It's enough time to get more than one idea across, so you can develop a story. It's not like a sort of advert on TV where you've got to say your thing, you get the point across, and then you walk out.
Patreon.com/Cosmic Shambles.
It's enough time to develop an idea, but it's short enough that you've got to know where you're going, you've got to get there really quickly, and so the payoff has got to be really quick.
I like the bite size. If you want the 7 minutes, it's sort of like, I'm going to tell you something very, very interesting about one topic. And sometimes it's like all you need is that 7 minutes to then go off and like think about it on your own, and maybe like, maybe you go on a Wikipedia trail or then you go and read a book.
Thought I'd go back to the dorms, read your book.
And so it's a really good length of time, because it's about the right length of time to, oh, here's an idea, I'm going to think about it, let's develop a little story, and then that's the end. And then there's another one, and then there's another one. And so it's this perfect combination of allowing you enough different ideas in one night, while still giving each one enough time to breathe a bit.
The first one that I did was on one of my research areas, which is Mercury and its environment. So introducing the planet Mercury and its environment and all the things that we had learnt about it in 7 minutes. But it's amazing. It really gets you to clarify your key points, doesn't it? You have 7 minutes, no chattering, no waffling. It's quite good, actually. I think it's a good lesson maybe everyone should do.
Yeah, there's a good lesson for you, Jethro, for all young'uns.
Short is always hard. So I think, as we've discovered over the years, as Robin's discovered to his slight infuriation over the time, that most scientists aren't used to an 8-minute brief or a 7-minute brief or a 6-minute brief. They're used to half an hour or 45 minutes or 30 seconds. But that middle gap is different.
It's become this thing. It's fun watching people try and squish that little period, which is 7 minutes.
And I think the thing I realised after doing a couple of them was that there's an enormous advantage with 9 Lessons and with the Compendium shows, which is that you've got an incredibly generous audience. I think a lot of the science communication we teach assumes that somehow you found yourself in a pit with a set of hostile people who'll give you 30 seconds to be interesting. And actually life isn't like that, and our audiences here aren't like that either. They're willing to listen to whatever. As long as you're interested, they're interested. And so that gives you space to be playful.
I also think it's been good for a lot of scientists, because I feel like a lot of scientists got a lot of performance geeks through it, which helped them with their communication. So I like to think, you know, the comedy side gave back in the only way we could.
People still run over, and it makes me very sad.
I remember Marcus Brigstock overran so long that Steve Pretty's band started playing him off as though it was the Oscars, and he'd already had about 3 warnings, so it felt, and I think Marcus was both, found it hilarious and devastating.
I remember those very first days very, very well indeed, and the kind of madness of it, and the overrunning and the overbooking and everything else. It was brilliant.
There was hundreds of acts on the bill, and the nights had really overrun.
This is. You're right. I do realise that basically it's a sensation now that we want the end of the world. This is going on forever. Come on, Mayans. I call it value for money.
When I first came up with 9 Lessons, the general feeling was that's a stupid idea and it's not going to work.
Tonight, so you know what it is, basically what we're doing is celebrating the majesty of the universe and most of the things in it.
But I think everything, you know, so many different opportunities that I've had have come from other people going, let's make a platform.
Yeah, let's go for it.
Originally, the first 9 Lessons that I did, I actually wrote the cheque for Hammersmith Apollo. I had just enough in my bank account, and it was a funny thing because everyone was going, oh, this seems like a mad idea. And so it was a fun risk. It actually felt like I had such a belief in it.
Yeah, and these days, you know, shows like 9 Lessons and Compendium and stuff, we don't get any funding to put them on. And, you know, Robin and me and Melinda and Joe and all the Shambles team, we don't take a fee for doing the shows or anything like that. It's just, it's entirely funded by our brilliant Patreon supporters, first of all, and, you know, ticket sales from previous years. And that's what, you know, that's what means we can keep putting the shows on each and every year, and most importantly, it's what means that we can donate all the profits from the shows each year to charity as well. So that's, you know, that's obviously a huge part of it.
But I think everything, you know, so many different opportunities that I've had have come from other people going, let's make a platform, and you've not thought about trying that. So I think that's the thing, is that if you're part of that, more often than not, if you're part of something that says, hey, I've come up with a stupid idea, let's try it, with luck, you have lots of other people who come up with stupid ideas that they want to try as well.
It's such a fine line between stupid and clever. Yeah,
it's just a little turnabout.
And so normally you find there's a certain group of people who come up with ideas with no sense of financial gain. And I remember some of the clubs that I used to do and used to run, and people go, why are you doing that? There's no money in it, blah, blah. And you go, well, that's in the end what leads to arena tours of science shows.
Have you started to think, it's a bit mad, isn't it?
First time that I met Brian Cox was his agent of the time, Sue, said, oh, you've got to meet this young guy. I think you'd really get on. And we went out, sort of had a drink in a cafe. And neither of us really particularly remember it very much at all. And then I think before I did the pilot for a radio show that didn't come to fruition, which was with Brian, I think I'd got him along to do the second Hammersmith show.
Thank you.
Now, that was before he was famous. He'd done a few documentaries, done a few BBC 4 documentaries. In fact, I think the head of BBC 4 at the time said, this guy's going nowhere, we really mustn't use him in anything else. And then almost instantaneously, Wonders of the Solar System became enormous, and everything that we've seen since happened. So he did, the first time that we actually did a live show together, he wasn't famous, Brian Cox.
The universe is big and beautiful.
And when we started doing the Infinite Monkey Cage together, he wasn't quite famous, Brian Cox, then either. We'd done this panel show. Well, it was 3 scientists talking about the week's news, and then they wanted a comedian just to come in and chat, and I just did it down the line. And then afterwards, people said that show didn't work, but I wonder if we put Brian together with the idiot.
I'll mime and you speak. So we go the universe, right?
Yeah. The universe is over 12 days old, and the shiniest bits are just over there, just near the dark bits, which are scarier. See, now I've turned you more northeastern. I've done you Mark Gatiss, but more often it's more very beautiful things that are wonderful.
Monkey Cage and 9 Lessons and all those things are in like kind of almost 18 months, maybe a little bit more of each other. It was just at that point there was this, and I was really driven. It was a lucky thing, you know. Brian was finding his feet. I was really driven by this idea of how am I going to make these shows that are science variety shows. So everything had kind of fallen into place by 2009.
I don't want to mess this up.
Oh God. Then eventually I did Uncaged Monkeys as well, and that again was very much my idea. Why don't we put science on the road, and why don't we again create these kind of slightly variety shows?
Don't point, he does that. He's pointing up there. Oh, you're doing that.
And then that was with the thing with Amy from Phil McIntyre, who I'd known since she was a teenager, and that's when I suggested, why don't we do a science tour? And obviously that's kind of worked out very well for them now, because they do all the tours with Brian, etc.
It's the strangest double act, isn't it?
So 2012, we did an End of the World show, which actually built up to exactly when the world was meant to end, from not because of the Mayan prophecies, but because of the misunderstanding, perhaps deliberate misunderstanding, of the Mayan prophecies.
Tonight, we have got past what was possibly going to be the end of our lives.
And then I think the next year we said, well, why don't we do a separate kind of show?
I'm very interested in the problem of wave function collapse, especially wave function collapse in the context of quantum cosmology. So you have a wave function for the entire universe. What does that mean? It probably means, I think, well, certainly in many worlds interpretation, there's a quantum...
No one's got a clue what you're talking about. No one's got a clue. This is not the kind of thing, right? We're on in 5 minutes. We're going to be doing a proper show in Hammersmith. What they want you to do is the nice stuff.
Are we on in 5 minutes in all worlds? Are there multiple worlds? I don't know. We could be on in 1% of the worlds. But who collapses the wave function?
Do you know what? Sometimes your physics begins to sound like philosophy. It does. It does. What? I know. Exactly. So what you need to do tonight is go, look up there, isn't it nice? It's the moon. All right?
Wave function collapse.
No, moon.
Collapse.
Nice moon. Wave function. Nice moon.
I had no idea what to expect when I did the Christmas show with Robin and Brian. It was like where you're quietly walking down a corridor and you open a door and inside are clowns and balloons popping and explosions and alligators and then you close the door again and you think, what on earth is that? And I think compendium is the right word. It is such a delightful mix of creativity and ideas. I was happy to try and add one voice to that mayhem.
The idea of keeping the lineup secret came very early on.
So the moment I remember of all the shows we've done is very, very clear. And I remember it was the first big show I'd ever done. It was the winter of 2013. It was the Hammersmith show. And I turned up at this theatre, I didn't know what was going on. And I did my piece, but it's not my bit that I remember. And I was standing at the side backstage. You know, the previous act came off and the Space Oddity video, Chris Hadfield's video, started playing on the screen. And then Brian was at the keyboard and he was playing along with the video, and the whole audience thought this was the coolest thing they'd ever seen. because Brian Cox was playing keyboard to the Space Odyssey video. And then the vocals started and Chris Hadfield walked out onto stage, and I will never forget that 3 seconds where the whole, like 4,500 people just couldn't believe what they were seeing, because no one knew he was in England. He'd only just got back to Earth, basically, and then they hit the roof. And it was the most astonishing piece of, firstly, showmanship. Like the idea to put it together like that was beautiful. But it was the collective shock and the perfection of this moment that he walked out with his guitar singing, and then him and Brian just went through the rest of the song. And it, like, no, I don't believe anyone who was in the room will ever forget that moment.
I think we were doing a Thursday and a Saturday that year.
I could just go, you know, on Thursday we had an incredible thing, we had Chris Hadfield on. Unfortunately he's in Dublin today. But nevertheless we thought it seems a pity not to sing Space Odyssey, so I'll do it.
And so that was a fun way of doing it, because by that point it had gone round that Chris Hadfield, oh dear, people a bit, oh, I wish we'd gone that night, that was on Chris Hadfield was on.
So I'll go.
It's all right. Try start again, Brian.
Right,
yeah. Joe, Chris Hadfield.
And so we played, you know, playing a little dummy thing.
To find that out by experiment, I'm going to sing it,
And so people had an extra bit for those who didn't know they'd been let down. Oh God, I didn't even know we missed Chris Hadfield, and now we do. We haven't missed Chris Hadfield. So that probably was one of the loudest reactions. Like, you know, the cosh that we've put ourselves under for finding big name bands. Because I think one year, I think about 2016 or 15, we had 65 Days of Static playing so loudly it was terrifying.
Play this one fucking loud.
And then I think the next year would have been The Cure, and on and on and on. And so each time you go, well, how do you get bigger than The Cure? And actually you don't. You just have a kind of, you know, you go, well, Duran Duran are pretty popular too as well.
And in fact, actually, the reason why I don't like doing it is because I much prefer being at events where I'm the best thing that people are going to see. I just think the standard of quality is too high.
We got a great bill tonight.
There was a point where I decided that 9 Lessons and Carols had gone on for too long and was becoming just a little bit staged.
It's over, ladies and gentlemen!
And I think in my head I was always worried, rather than about making money, has it lost its... I'm bored before a thing has truly taken off as a capitalist kind of project, and that's an annoying thing. So I thought that I didn't want it just to become, oh, the atheists are getting together again.
You've been seeing the same people over and over again?
I think in terms of having a comeback, I got in contact with Trent Burton, who's a great producer, and just so you know, the person who's interviewing me now while we're doing this. And, I mean, sat right opposite me, so there's very little choice in anything that I say now. And then the handy thing happened, which was lots of people kept saying, oh, please can we do it, please can we do it.
Every year I try to have as close to 50% as I can of people who've never done 9 lessons before. We get loads of people every year asking if they can do 9 lessons.
Then eventually I was like, yeah, but we'll change it a little bit and we're calling it 9 Lessons and Carols for Curious People, because it's now so far away from the reason it was called 9 Lessons and Carols for Godless People.
Robin and I decided to change it to Curious People in 2018 rather than Godless, just because it just felt right. And as Robin has said in his interview, I'll cut to that now.
But one of the things was that I think I'd noticed that within the skeptics world and within the atheist world, it wasn't quite what I might have imagined it was going to be. You know, there were some what I felt were quite negative voices, sometimes quite discriminatory voices, and we noticed certainly in the American skeptic movement, you suddenly go, oh God, this is actually quite a right-wing movement.
You're ridiculous, and men's rights is nothing.
It's that thing that I used to say about the fact that the difference between an atheist being a dick and someone who's a fundamental religious person. The fundamental religious person is there going, it says in this book, whereas atheists can be kind of free choice arseholes, which seems a real pity if you go, you don't have to be a bigot because you haven't got a God that says you need to be a bigot on this particular issue, but you have chosen to be a bigot.
You're a sexist, egotistical, lying, hypocritical bigot.
Then you start to worry about, I mean, I think there's certain comedians and certain kind of, some of the high profile atheists who you really do see it as being their personality.
You're not wrong, Walter, you're just an asshole.
I think some kind of the forthright atheists, they didn't realise where God lived for some people, which is in the kind of, it's not in the fact part of the brain. It's in an emotional part of the brain.
His emotions must rule his brain.
What we're doing is describing nature as best we can. Certainty doesn't really come into it, in my view.
I think it's quite nice, it's for the curious.
What I like is it's slightly evolved out of some of the kind of early noughts, new atheist stuff. It's slightly evolved away from any needless, like, preening edginess towards a whole lot more kind of beauty and delight, and I think it's remained something that is so inclusive and so positive. Wholesome, man. It's very wholesome.
What's really nice is that it bridges a gap between people like me who are intimidated by those sorts of things and think that once you get past school learning and things like that, if you don't continue with it, then there's no way to keep doing it. But actually, I mean, my goodness, if lessons had been like this when I was in high school, I probably would have gone to uni.
I was on tour with Dave Gorman and I went into a bookshop and I bought, I think it was called On the Shoulders of Giants, which was a book based on some conversations Melvin Bragg had with a bunch of scientists. And I read that, and I'd also just read The Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins and Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. And so I was probably like kind of late 20s there, mid to late 20s. And that was when I started thinking, I used to love science, and it seems like there's loads of stories I never found at school because it had all become equations. And that was when I started thinking, how do I put on shows where people like me who are not scientists can come and not be scared, but be introduced to lots of big ideas.
If we took this whole gig to my parents' village, I think they'd really love it. And we could do it on a tram.
We'd had this interesting thing where people after about the second year, probably on the second year of Nine Lessons and Carols, they had bought tickets sometimes off eBay because the tickets sold so quickly, they would be sold on. And they'd thought that it was Nine Lessons and Carols. They hadn't seen the second bit. And so they would turn up, these people would be religious people, and then they'd go, oh dear, I did not realise this is not really what we thought it was. And I got communication from certain people who went, we bought the tickets by mistake, think it was a Nine Lessons and Carols show, but we thought we'd come along and watch the first half and then leave, and then actually we enjoyed the whole show.
I actually enjoyed that!
I mean, the one thing that I do notice looking back is the first show, I think Josie was in it, I think Joanna Neary would have been in it, there were a few other, but it's not great in terms of the diversity of scientists that we had.
Don't get me wrong, I like women. We need them to help us evolve into dolphins.
And it was probably far too male, white and male, I think. But that changed reasonably quickly over the next couple of years.
It is very obvious how white and male those early lineups are, and that's, there's a million reasons, not all valid, for that.
I think Trent was very good at really ensuring that we had diversity and looking further and further.
I think I heard of Nine Lessons first just out of the blue when I was asked to take part in it, and my initial thought was it made no sense, and I've done it a number of times now and it still doesn't make any sense, but that's the point of it, I think.
The first time I was approached to perform, I remember being absolutely thrilled by it because I'd seen so many legends performing, so I couldn't quite believe that I got to be a part of it. and then was allowed free rein to do something utterly chaotic for 7 minutes.
Can't remember how it happened, but I know it was Trent that would have gotten in touch with me, and the show was coming to the Lowry and they asked if I wanted to perform. And when I looked into it, I was like, yes, absolutely, these are my people.
I used to always be a big Josie and Robin fan, so I would listen to the Utter Shambles podcast. And I remember when they were putting on this show, and it was always full of like my favourite comedians, and there would always be scientists that like I always felt so inferior like to learn about, and I didn't really know enough about them. But then seeing like them do demonstrations and stuff like that, I felt a little less stupid. But it was always a gig that I looked at as being like, that's great, I want to be on that, and it feels like a big deal to now be on it myself.
9 Lessons is one of those things that I've kind of been aware of from the start, and I was talking to Trent actually earlier about when he first emailed me to do one of these shows. Apparently my reaction was like, finally, you've asked me, I've been waiting for this call for years. So
Sometimes they ask, oh, I've never heard of 9 Lessons, what is it? And then I panic and have to try and explain what the hell this show is to them.
It's complicated.
And then they come along and then they don't know what it is either after they've been there.
So confusing.
Yeah, so 9 Lessons has been part of the Cosmic Shambles universe since 2017. We'd been doing other live shows.
But we've done this once before, and I would say that you were among the bottom 2 Kirsty McCalls I've ever sung with. On account of the bits of the song that you know.
Who's the other one?
Mate, there's only been you. I was trying to make
After the first year when we came back at Conway Hall, we then moved to King's Place for 2018 in London, which we've been there ever since. That's kind of, Bloomsbury was the old home. Bloomsbury, I guess, was the home of godless people, and King's Place is now the home of curious people.
So I was aware of it tangentially, but I hadn't been to see it yet. And then I met Melinda through her previous role, and we got chatting. We were talking about, you know, King's Place, and she was talking about 9 Lessons, and we kind of thought, oh, King's Place, 9 Lessons, that could work. And then we brought Trent in, and we all chatted together. I'm always looking for things that are innovative and exciting and support our charitable aims. We have an amazing, rich sort of spoken word program, and we have a music program. So it's just an ideal fit of everything we do.
It's a perfect match.
So you might remember early 2020, there was this whole thing about wet markets.
But I think it would be crazy not to mention what we did during COVID.
Welcome to 9 Lessons and Carols for Socially Distanced People.
The incredibly ambitious 24-hour live show.
Both of us are now going to be on this stage for the next 25 hours.
Late summer, we realised 9 Lessons isn't going to happen this year because of COVID. And then at some point, I thought, why don't we do all the 9 Lessons shows that we've had to cancel and Compendium in a row, back to back, live online.
The 25-hour thing that was a stupid idea, and I think we all blamed each other for it.
You know, Mark Watson had done 24-hour shows, and he'd done a 24-hour live stream.
I'm all right, thanks, Robin, but I'm not the one this time having to do this, am I?
So I thought, let's do a 24-hour live online 9 Lessons. We'll do it a bit different. We'll have a studio, which we went to King's Place. Robin will be on stage for 24 hours straight. Steve Pretty will be a one-man house band, because 9 Lessons has to have a house band. He'll be on stage for 24 hours. I'll direct it for 24 hours straight. The crew rotated except for Melinda and Joe. They were backstage running bits and pieces for the whole 24 hours as well.
And so it was this incredible way that it was put together by, in particular, Trent and Mill and Joe.
And it felt like a really stupid and fun idea. And it just turned out, it turned out to be exactly that, actually.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
It was stupid and it was fun and it was exhausting.
That was like having Yoko Ono in the room. That was like one of those great kind of, 1960s art happenings.
I feel like this whole event is sort of a bit like that, isn't it?
Well, Trent is very clumsy, and one of the things that I remember most fondly from the 25-hour show was he hadn't actually walked down some steps for a while during lockdown, and he had to go down one step and he broke his foot.
Yes. So, about a month out from the 24-hour show, I didn't leave the house. I was taking no risks of potentially getting COVID. And then the day before the show, we were heading to the studio to set up, do the tech. I took 2 steps outside my flat, slipped, somehow broke my ankle. It is amazing what adrenaline can do to suppress pain. Did the tech, did the whole show on a broken ankle, stood for 40-something hours. The second the show finished, I took my shoe off and it was just black as the night.
Jesus Christ, that's gruesome.
I wanted to have some science experiments that ran over the course of the 24 hours. We did a black hole hunting thing using some data from Chris Lintott and the Zooniverse people. And genuinely, by the end of the show, we'd made, or the audience watching had made a discovery from this data.
So based only on this supernova, which we did not know about 24 hours ago, and based only on the calculations which I've done after a pot of coffee this morning, that's our very own 9 lessons calculation. When we put this one into the box with all of the other supernovae that our surveys and our project are capturing, we're likely to have collectively reduced the age of the universe a little bit. So the universe is younger than we thought it was yesterday.
And there was a scientific paper published by Oxford that literally has me and Melinda and Robin as co-authors. So that was utterly ridiculous. And I also knew I wanted to cross live to every continent on Earth.
We had scientists from every single one of the 7 continents.
Because, COVID was something that affected everywhere on the planet.
So yeah, hopefully we're going to go to Antarctica. We're going to try this a few times. Alexandra, can you hear us?
Yes, loud and clear.
We had astronauts, we had Robert Smith, we had Tim Minchin, and then something went wrong.
The internet went down at 2 a.m.
So we went off air as such for about 45 minutes.
We haven't had a sleep, by the way. We should make this clear. We've not used this for snoozing.
No.
We've actually been talking about showbiz and music.
We've just been carrying on as normal, essentially.
And nothing kicks your brain back into gear like an absolute emergency.
And we had to keep the show on track somehow, which was mostly done through the online chat becoming really populated by all the great people we had helping us.
And the interesting thing was then to see that people were just chatting to each other in the chat room.
So if I say the secret message, which is Trandom, that is the secret message, Trandom. If you are still able to hear us watching on YouTube, please now type Trandom and we will find out what's going on.
That sense of community. And a lot of people who watched the 25-hour thing, they've then met up since and they've kind of become friends, and I think that's great.
Yeah, it was, honestly, I genuinely think it's one of the best things we've ever done at Shambles. It was everything we're about.
I have cycled 5,000 kilometres this year around London. I have had 1 puncture until Friday, because on the way here, I had a 3rd one in the other wheel, the one that didn't have a puncture yesterday.
Oh, man.
So I left my bike at King's Cross Station. I got on the tube and the DLR. I sprinted up the hill, and I am on the Meridian line for 12 o'clock.
My favourite thing about the 25-hour thing was that we had probably the thing that had the greatest audience, the biggest audience, was unsurprisingly Robert Smith had re-recorded some songs especially for the show.
This is Robert from The Cure. Very happy to be part of 9 lessons and carols for socially distanced people.
And once we had an international audience, immediately afterwards, John Luke Roberts came on as Chaucer, talking in the strange kind of strangulated oldie English that he's made up.
Right, me pooms, very naughty, he laughed at me pooms, so naughty they are, and he hid them under me bod, but me whiff on me pooms, and She was very crass with me not to. He can tell ye that for free.
And we started to see people in the chat room who were from all around the world wondering if that's actually how English people spoke. And so it was a great idea by Trent to make sure that we just immediately lost nearly all of that audience and went back to having the people it was really intended for, which was not a big international audience who might make us rich and famous.
It felt like the old 9 Lessons in a way. It felt completely chaotic.
A linearly superposed chicken.
The most incredible 24 hours and an amazing achievement. And
I, for one, welcome my new sentient robot overlords. That was harder to say than I anticipated.
Just what we all needed right then. A great way to celebrate Christmas during a pandemic.
My annual distribution of free toys represented an unacceptable socialist intervention in the marketplace.
Yeah, it's been very interesting to see the other things that it inspired, because I only did it almost, it's the normal thing that I suddenly come up with an idea and I go, let's make this. So I hoped that 9 Lessons would work, and once it really worked the first time, we immediately went, oh, well, let's do it next year. But again, there was no 10-year plan, 7-year plan, whatever it might be. Then there was that nice thing of knowing that putting on those shows helped create Festival of Spoken Nerd, because they saw that.
One small practical result of Robin starting 9 Lessons and all the other shows that go with it was it made us start, in a sense, Festival of Spoken Nerd, because we realized we wanted to do these big shows, but this is myself, Helen Arney and Steve Mould, we didn't have anywhere to try out nerdy material. Whereas Robin just came in with these medium to large gigs. So Festival of the Spoken Nerd started in its first iteration as a new material night in September 2010, because I think we'd all been booked to do 9 Lessons that year. So we were like, what are we going to do? And we decided we'd do our own new material night, Festival of the Spoken Nerd, to try out some things before we had to do the big gigs. So it did, by starting out at the top of the food chain, it forced more smaller gigs and nights to start happening, which is very nice.
Very nice indeed. Who made that fantastic thing?
You know, I know that the people who ran Blue Dot, the festival Blue Dot, that they came to Hammersmith and went, oh, why don't we kind of do this as a festival?
I think these shows have definitely helped with sort of encouraging breaking down that kind of two cultures barrier, that science is a part of culture, and so science talks fit really well on a bill with comedy, with music. And I think you see that now when you look around. Obviously we've got festivals like Blue Dot where that's their thing, but also if you go to music festivals, quite often now, like Glastonbury, I was at Glastonbury this year, Glastonbury has like science talks.
I mean, obviously here, the number of noises that you will hear in a single 10 minutes, there is a greater soundtrack than you would hear on any other planet in our solar system, right?
For me, it's about making science a part of culture. You say, like, it's an entertainment evening as much as it's a science evening. It's something for people to go to in place of maybe going to the theatre or the cinema or a gig. And I think that's absolutely crucial, that we see science as a part of culture and it's not this separate entity aside from that, yeah.
9 Lessons, I think, plays a really valuable role in changing the discourse about science.
I think these shows have had an enormous impact on where science fits within culture. I think what Robin and everyone else involved with these shows has done is put science more front and centre and not apologetically.
I'm not going to apologise for this.
I think it's the only thing I've done that my school friends have understood what it is that I'm doing and been excited about it. So I've been contacted by someone I hadn't spoken to for years saying, like, I saw you're on the bill for 9 Lessons, that's amazing. So I think the fact that it gets through to people who maybe like to be a little bit nerdy about science, but that's not what they do all the time, and maybe like don't want to be known as being nerdy about science but can enjoy this kind of stuff. So I think it's nice that it just lets people say that, yeah, it's cool to enjoy this stuff.
Someone can come to this show who absolutely adores science, but you could also bring a family member who's maybe a bit less into it and who wouldn't go to a full hour-long lecture. So I think it's quite a good, like, gentle introduction to science as entertainment for people who maybe haven't done a lot of that before.
To be interested in one thing and then just go down the rabbit hole. It's really enriched the way that I play my own gigs and approach the thing that I do as a main thing.
Yeah, I relish the opportunity to share the stage with scientists and people who are used to public speaking and stuff like that. Yeah, they'll show me up. I had a go recently. Yeah, I did a tour where I attempted to incorporate some form of lecturing into the concert.
It's a genre basically that Robin has decided to create and that has been incredibly successful.
Robin has invented a genre. I think a lot of people have said that as well, but it's absolutely true.
It's almost hard to remember how we all saw this before these shows came along, because once you get the idea of Shambles, it's so obvious, but you have to have seen someone do it to really believe it will work.
It's kind of, I guess it seems so normal now to marry those things together, and that's probably the impact in itself.
Robin and you guys have kind of created the audience for it, really. I mean, the audience was always out there, but I think a lot of people, if you took it to a commissioner or something in the early days, would be like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't, why would you cross the streams between music and science, or between comedy and science? Like, that's insane. Why would you do that?
You said crossing the streams was bad.
I thought it was a really unusual thing for me to be a part of as a musician. You know, usually it's kind of just music lineups, or if it's going to be kind of a varied lineup, it's music and, you know, comedy or theatre. But like the science element is like a really new thing for me, but I really enjoyed it and I learnt a lot.
I think that being part of this show brings out the fun side of me. And I can tell the really interesting stories about the animals that I study in my everyday marine biologist kind of world.
By the end of this, you're going to be a fan of the horseshoe crab, trust me.
I feel like we've all been really privileged by Robin's relentless thirst for discovery.
The thirst for knowledge is a very commendable thing.
I think 9 Lessons is an example of really all the shows that I do that are solo shows as well, which is all of them. I want people, I've always used this kind of crass comparison, which is it's creating a mixtape, it's creating a playlist, it's saying, I love these things, it would be nice if you liked some of these things too, because it's nice. And because personally, I get so excited when I meet people with ideas that I've not heard before, and kind of people who change the way that you view the world, then I think that's what I want other people to have, that same excitement.
He was the person that brought science into entertainment and, you know, mixed it up with other types of entertainment. Robin brought science into that mix and is helping people increasingly to not feel excluded from that.
I think Robin has genuinely changed the conversation internationally, actually, not just nationally, but internationally about science, because he has made it possible to think of science as something entertaining rather than simply informative or educational. He's made it possible for people to see it as a bedfellow of comedy, of other entertainments, music and so on. He's made it a thing where people are prepared to say, I am a nerd, and that's not lame and it's not necessarily serious either. You can take things really seriously and still find them funny. And that, I think, is Robin's absolute genius.
It's really important to show that sometimes scientists don't take themselves so seriously. There isn't this separation where we have to have science as a very serious subject, that it's part also of our entertainment in terms of music and comedy, and part of sort of the human enjoyment of life.
And that's really what I wanted to get across, was the playfulness of the scientific imagination as opposed to that more austere imagery and notion that is very often kind of projected onto them. So that's what I wanted to get out of, you know, whether it was Ben Goldacre or whoever it might be, is I wanted to get that sense of, we're just kind of talking about a load of ideas.
You stand by the exit and you hear people saying that they didn't know it could be like this, that they didn't know that scientists could be rude, funny, distracted, confused.
I'm so confused. The thing that Robin has always done so naturally is to connect different big ideas. He's not afraid of talking about quantum physics and then talking about, you know, a painting of a dog that he saw and then talking about his favourite book.
Oliver Postgate, I love him!
And he's quite comfortable understanding that those are all different facets of humanity. Because in some sense, these shows were sort of social media before social media happened, right? Because it's like, dogs, clarinets, quantum science, neuroscience, a poem, you know, and now scrolling through social media, that's the kind of thing everyone's used to. But back then, no one was doing that. And so this was before this idea of just consuming bite-sized mixtures of everything. And the thing that Robin did was he made it not something to be afraid of. And it shows that it's okay to connect them. If you're going to talk to a philosopher, you don't have to, like, I don't know, put on some special robe and, you know, the proper hat and then go and behave and drink tea in a particular way. You know, you just talk about it because you're human.
And I think that these shows really bring the beauty of scientific discovery and how it can enable human connection to make it accessible to somebody like me to go, oh yeah, like that affects my life, that affects all of us here sharing this environment, sharing this planet. So if it can sort of work on me, then yeah, I think it can absolutely work on anybody.
And importantly, the other thing Robin does is that he shows that it's okay not to understand it all the first time.
I suppose I don't know.
He's not afraid of saying, you know, I've had quantum mechanics explained to me 73 times and I'm still not sure I understand all of it.
No one's here. Oh, what? God, you don't understand quantum electrodynamics at all. What an idiot. You must be the most stupid person in Litchfield, right? I don't know why I chose Litchfield. It may well be a Freudian reason. It could be a Jungian reason involving flying saucers. Anyway, so.
But that's just honest and it's okay. And that's how these big ideas work, is that you can sort of be interested without being able to pass an exam in it.
Well, we don't know. We've discovered it.
Robin's never been afraid of just saying, well, it's interesting, let's talk about it. And that's what we do.
There weren't any other comics doing that I was aware of when he started doing it. And of course other people have followed suit now, which is great. And I'm sure he'd say that too. I don't think he wanted to have a monopoly on you know, combining those different things. And it's come about very organically for him as well, because Robin has such an interest in science.
Dara was really chompy. Like, he came up to me, again, I think it was at Richard and Judy, and went, I've been waiting to be asked to do this, because I think he really wanted to do science comedy, but it was, which he does brilliantly.
The neutrinos have mutated.
But I think probably these things did help give people a platform to just check out whether it worked or not.
Pretty funny.
You know, to make something happen, to create something that doesn't otherwise exist in culture, is so fantastic and so positive, you know.
So I wiped it into the sea!
I don't think you can underestimate the influence of 9 Lessons, and more specifically Robin, on the world of science communication. And I do mean the world. There is no question that a lot of people owe their career, their success, the birth of an industry, really, to Robin, and I include myself in that.
Without those shows and that culture being built, I wouldn't have been able to play songs about science for the last 15 years, or whatever I've been doing it.
Makes these particles break bonds or move at greater speeds. The way they bond and move give substances their properties.
So Robin has just opened the door for a lot of people who probably never saw themselves walking out on a stage in a venue in the evening, you know, always saw themselves probably as walking out on a lecture theatre to students. He has opened the door for that to happen.
You know, people talk about these great things that happened in culture, like, you know, Bob Dylan coming out with an electric guitar and the Sex Pistols suddenly playing in Manchester, and obviously I wasn't at any of those things. But for me personally, it is true that coming to one of these events was quite a profound thing that happened. And it really, really hit me right between the eyes that this was quite a profoundly important thing. You know, you and Trent and Robin, I genuinely, you know, I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, you have done something amazing.
You know, I'm a mental health researcher, I'm a psychiatrist. Talking about those things can sometimes be difficult in a kind of public forum. You know, I like to think that, you know, doing this kind of thing, I can reach people that I don't reach in my academic work. The other impact of these shows, of course, is personal. It does buy me a tiny bit of credibility with my children, although they're incredibly frightened when I go on the stage.
Dad, you're embarrassing me.
But yeah, it's interesting. And then when Chris Hadfield and Evan Hadfield, his son, said, "Can we just make this a version of this in Toronto?" I was like, "Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a great thing." What I love is the idea of lots of different people being inspired to go off in lots of different directions.
I was inspired by what Robin and Brian had been doing with their shows on stage, and there's definitely room in Canada for the type of madcap variety show that Brian and Robin do here in the UK. And we thought that would work well on stage. Working with my son Evan, we put together a show we call Generator. It's gone superbly well, and I think it's important that people see ideas as entertainment.
The only thing that becomes annoying is that some of those people don't then entirely forget where the ideas came from, which is not true again of Evan and Chris at all. And the lovely thing as well was they said, because you came up with the idea, basically, can you be the compere? So I always, get an invite to do Generator whenever they do that.
Over the years, I think that this show that Robin and Trent put together and have created has really opened things out. And of course, lots of other nights have jumped on the bandwagon and created some healthy competition. But that's just the way it goes, isn't it?
Other people have done it bigger, made it more commercial, I guess. But it always takes someone to, in the nicest possible way, be stupid enough to take the risk to do something like this.
Are you insane?
The original kind of pioneers kind of get forgotten. Robin's kind of the James Jameson of world science communication.
Yeah, I've learnt about these things, and it doesn't make any difference. You just have to keep making things.
Good. On we go.
My favourite moments.
My favourite memory is every year.
We have much to get through to avoid this show bumping into Thursday's show.
It's very hard to choose specific favourite memories because there's just been so many.
I'm told that I have done this before this 9 Lessons show. I have no memory of that.
I have ADHD, and so does Robin. And one of the things I've realised is when people say to me, "What was your favourite one of these?" my brain will just be like, "You've never done it." No. So as far as I'm concerned, I've never done 9 Lessons, which is a shame because I've been doing it for about 15 years of my life.
One of my favourite moments was Joanna Neary would do this character who was giving a lecture about sex toys but was very, very nervous.
Here's my recession-proof talk. Sex toys on a budget. Sorry.
And so she goes, my throat's very dry. Another thing you can do with vibrating balls. I'm sorry.
Sorry, can you not glare at me like that? I'm nearly done, thank you. So I'm actually doing this to build my confidence.
And Jim Al-Khalili, the physicist, was at the side of stage and was so worried that this person on stage really did have a very dry throat that he started to walk out with a glass of water. And I had to explain to Jim Al-Khalili that it was actually someone doing a comedy character pretending to be nervous. And he was embarrassed by that, but I said, I think that's a really beautiful moment. I said, you shouldn't be embarrassed. One, it shows that Jo performs so brilliantly that you fully believe that she was, that she had a very dry throat, and 2, you were prepared to walk out on stage with a glass of water. I thought that was lovely on many different levels.
I just have this abiding memory of Stuart Lee trying to out 90s emo a Bloomsbury Theatre audience.
Not that long after Patrick Moore died, and I'd worked with him on the Sky at Night for many years. So I remember coming on, having been introduced as the presenter of Sky at Night, and mentioning Patrick and getting this enormous round of applause from the crowd, and feeling that there was sort of love for science communication, and for Patrick in the room.
I'm Chris Lintott. I've had the privilege for the last 10 years to work with Patrick on the Sky at Night.
It was a really special moment.
Space Shambles, 2018. I was going on stage to answer questions on the topic of space with a few people, one of whom was Chris Hadfield. And so I had known him before, and so we were sort of chatting beforehand, and we were about to walk on the stage, and he realised that my lanyard was tangled in my microphone, and we couldn't get these two things undone. And we're about to step onto the stage on the Royal Albert Hall. It's the biggest venue I've ever been on stage at. And so he sprints off and he grabs some scissors and he cuts off my lanyard, and we walk onto the stage. And I thought at that moment, that's why you're an astronaut and I'm not.
I think my most memorable moment has to be at the Hammersmith Odeon when Brian Cox came on with Dareem and we all flooded on stage and sang Things Can Only Get Better. It was just the most surreal experience I've ever had. You know, the Hammersmith Odeon is a fairly extraordinary venue to perform anyway. But then, you know, being the backing vocals for Brian Cox and Dareem was surreal as it comes.
We were running late during sound check, and I was coming up the stairs, and Brian was coming down the stairs, and he stopped and put his hand on my shoulder, and I don't think I've ever seen him look this serious. And he said, "Trent, have you seen the rest of Dareem?" And I laughed before I went, "Oh yeah, no, they're down there."
You can tap your feet, you can get up, you can dance.
And it was that was a nice moment of, these shows are weird, aren't they?
I would say my favourite memory that kind of encapsulates the Robin show experience was being backstage, and all the performers kind of hang out in the wing and backstage. This was one at the Hammersmith, and Robin went out and started doing his Brian Blessed impersonation.
Why can't I fly through the middle of Jupiter?
And as he's doing it, Chris Hadfield leans over to me and goes, "What is he doing?" And I had to explain to a Canadian astronaut why Robin was, the concept of Brian Blessed and what was happening out there. And at that point I was like, in no other situation in any career do you have to explain Brian Blessed to a cherished Canadian astronaut.
Gordon's alive! At one point I was studying maths A-level, and I remember we were doing an Apollo show, and I literally got the audience of 3,000 to help me with my homework, which was very fun.
People like Barry Cryer doing his Peace and Quiet song, where the whole gag was that the band would just sort of gradually, as he sang Peace and Quiet more and more through the song, it would gradually build in volume and intensity and nonsense. And by the end of which we were running around the auditorium, I was hitting a cowbell as loud as I could, yelling Peace and Quiet with a national treasure.
It's the slight anarchy of turning up, having done quite a lot of preparation and work and of all the music and stuff, and then going, okay, great, we're going to do that, but also then a musician, someone like Robin Hitchcock or someone saying, oh yeah, Steve, can we do this completely different tune? And yeah, and it's like 5 minutes before the show. I'm like, okay, right, okay, quick, listen to it. Okay, write some notes, go on stage and do it in front of 500 people with a like, sort of improvise something.
Yes, I want you, Mrs. Watson, honey.
So those are the sort of moments that are the highlights for me in a way, the spontaneous moments and the moments that couldn't happen anywhere else.
And sometimes we'd all get involved, like all singing as a big choir with Robin Hitchcock. That was a fantastic memory. All singing, was it Spiders?
I think Robin Hitchcock doing Ole Tarantula with a backing band of Alan and Stu and Kevin Eldon and Joanna and various others.
And also of meeting Jim Bob, the singer, for the first time, because I was a massive fan of his band Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. So I was incredibly nervous when I met him backstage at the Bloomsbury a 9 Lessons gig, which was probably now about 20 years ago.
Jim Bob coming down there and Izzy Sutty being there, and Izzy Sutty was such a huge fan of Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine, and you have that kind of incredible moment where you suddenly go, oh my God, I'm in the same green room as the band that when I was 15 were the most important band in the world.
And I was so nervous that I insisted on getting him a coffee, even though he didn't want one. Still feel really weird about that.
I remember Tim Minchin doing White Wine in the Sun, and it's the first time I'd heard him do it.
Drinking white wine in the sun.
And of course it's such a kind of, it's an elegiac Christmas song, you know, it's about the kind of Christmas he couldn't have at the time. So I remember that and thinking, you know, this guy is so good, he's going to be just fine. And that worked out pretty well. So yeah, once again, my talent spotting really there right at the beginning of things. No, of course, he was already hugely successful by then. And so it was just a privilege to be backstage at in the same venue as him.
One particular memory, which is personal to me was being in the wings. I think it was at Bloomsbury one year, and the Humanist Choir were singing White Wine in the Sun by Tim Minchin. And it was a year I lost my father, and it was just, it destroyed me. I mean, it's a beautiful song, it's a beautiful memory, and the perfect mix of the feeling of Christmas, the feeling of family, the feeling of togetherness, but done in a profoundly warm, human way.
That's not the song.
I had a really good time, had some very interesting conversations with some other people. I remember going out for a lot of beers after one of them and talking about pigeons, actually. Fancy pigeons. That was a personal highlight.
Pigeon? What pigeon?
This show has the best rider of all of the gigs. Honestly, it's so good. It's just a table full of all of my favourite snacks. Now, that shouldn't be my favourite thing about doing 9 lessons.
Snack foods.
One particular year, there was a famous children's entertainer, and this guy did twice his time and went into a climate change denial rant.
Yikes.
Which is the only time I've seen the audience at this show react negatively to a performer, and he was actually getting the slow hand claps and the boos and the heckles, and then I had to go on.
So before I had to go on stage and do my act, I was downstairs in one of the green rooms doing an online panel debate to students across the world to advise them about their careers. So one minute I'm talking to everyone going, yes, I'm a serious scientist, this is our science, blah, blah, and the next minute I'm on stage discussing maggots being shot up the nostrils of camels by the uterine juices. And it was like, this is a bit odd. And then we finished the event by being on stage with Boy George, and I'm there next to Steve Backshaw singing Fairy Tale of New York on the stage, and I'm like, this is a very weird life.
Alan Moore, the couple of years that he turned up were fantastic.
Very seldom that you get a chance to think, bless, about something as big as a universe.
I love puppetry, so anytime we can include puppetry, I will try and make that happen. My absolute favourite moment, therefore, has to be, we had a puppet version of the astronaut Sally Ride, and she was performed whilst Grace Petrie, folk singer, sang her song, The Golden Record, and it was just beautiful.
So send it in a rocket, yes, play after I'm gone. You're the plug that fits my socket. All the lights came on.
Sounds like a humble brag. But getting to do a duet with Charlotte Church, Robin had met her at something and was like, you and Grace Petrie should do a duet, and obviously I'm just this like little folk singer singing my songs, and she was amazing and so lovely and so gracious, and was just like, yeah, amazing, and sent me this email suggesting this song that was so like laughably light years beyond my vocal ability or musical understanding, and I had to go, yeah, we're slightly different types of musicians, you and me, Charlotte Church, in the sense that I kind of know 3 chords, and when it comes to singing, you're pretty good at that.
I've been thinking hard about this, and I think the first talk I gave at 9 Lessons was a talk about the volcanic eruption at Whakaari at what's known as White Island in New Zealand, and it happened just before one of the 9 Lessons events, and probably in my head I had another talk planned, but when that happened, it was so much in the news and it was in a field of interest of mine. I thought it was an important thing to talk about. Some bits of 9 Lessons are incredibly funny, but other bits of it are quite touching and quite meaningful as well, and sometimes it's hard to deliver that sort of message, but it's an important message to get across, I think.
My most memorable moments from a producer side of things are all usually or by nature, they're going to be the things that went wrong.
We're in a tight spot!
We had a performer, unfortunately, set a balloon on fire in a wooden venue, and because it was such a health and safety risk, we had to bring the show down early.
I'm not going to go into the details of the flammable pig that ended up in the rafters that meant we had to stop the show early. If you were there, you know that night.
I was lucky that year. I had been on before Balloon Man. Balloon Man does his demonstration with the exploding balloon, which promptly disappears into the rafters of the theatre, very close to the hot spotlights, thus causing a fire hazard, and the whole show had to be pulled immediately after that. Yes, there is no punchline, and a number of people were quite annoyed.
I don't want to say we bribed the health and safety at Hammersmith one year when Fran Scott was making a massive cannon.
It's just a bottle. It's about time you always have bottles coming at them.
There was one time at Hammersmith, I remember we'd cordoned off a disabled toilet, a backstage disabled toilet for us, and that was going to be like my lab of where I could make certain things, and I was making some explosives, and Ross Noble walked in expecting it to be a toilet, and he was like, I'm just going to walk out and pretend I never saw it.
The year we had The Cure, obviously it's The Cure.
And we had puppet versions of Robin and Brian that we brought on stage at the end to dance with The Cure. That was great.
But then having Eric Idle come on, having Brian do the end of life for Brian, and then have Eric Idle come on to do Bright Side of Life was ridiculous.
This is madness!
I don't know how much longer I'll do either Compendium or 9 Lessons. I think it still works. I think we still have lots of younger people coming, and that's very important to look at the audience and go, here's a new... I mean, I think also because Infinite Monkey Cage has lots of children who listen to it and teenagers who listen to it, that seems to be something that just keeps going and keeps going.
So I think the future of 9 Lessons is probably to, include more dogs. I don't know. It will keep going as long as we're not bored, which the dog clearly is. So yeah, as long as Robin and I aren't bored with the show, which we're definitely not, we will keep doing it as long as people want to keep coming to it. It's our big nerdy Christmas party, and it's never not fun.
In terms of how 9 Lessons and Cosmic Shambles is remembered, I kind of almost don't care, apart from the fact that as long as people are continuing to do lots of things which make science approachable, that mean that people feel that it's not a specialist different thing, that people feel it is part of the whole excitement and possibility of human curiosity, then I'm kind of happy. And I also would like people not to remember all the people who ripped us off and say that they came up with it. There was few things more annoying than being interviewed by a New Zealand journalist who went, oh, you do science comedy like Jimmy Carr. Yeah.
It's a very, very small, tiny pinprick revolution, but it is something.
I could have done with a little more information up front, but I know it doesn't work that way sometimes. Oh, help me, baby, 'cause I need to be sure. If time is my enemy, then I'm waging war. I've never been in this situation before. I'm into you, but what can I do when you're half out the door? But now I'm back for more. On the bathroom floor. But these drinks ain't gonna drink themselves. I gotta think how to get myself out of this hole. I could have done with a little more information up front, but I know it doesn't work that way sometimes. So give me your location, I'll come and make it harder on you and I. 'Cause I can take a punishment and learn to lean into the silence. It's just a shame, it's a shame, a shame that it was always gonna go this way. It was always gonna go this way. signaling the end of romance. I should have seen this coming way in advance. If I were she or if she were me, then we might stand a chance. Oh, but now I'm back for more. On the bathroom floor. But these drinks ain't gonna drink themselves. I gotta think how to get myself out of this hole. I could have done with a little more information up front, but I know it doesn't.
We're going on stage in an hour, so my brain is inside a dolphin costume already.
Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Even if you haven't enjoyed it, I still think you should support us at patreon.com/cosmicshambles. So, and also, by the way, click and subscribe. That's what they say, don't they? I'm 55 and I'm having to say click and subscribe. I mean, just for the loss of dignity, you should click and subscribe.